Oh, look, I'll give you control of that.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone, to the final Planning South Committee meeting of 2023. I'd like to welcome the speakers this evening. I may remind you this is a meeting at which the public are present, although there is not a public meeting. And if you could stick to your 2 minutes allotted time, that would really be appreciated. There is no fire drill this evening, so if you hear the alarm, please leave by the nearest exit, which is over there or behind us, and we meet at the bandstand just in the centre of Horsham. May I remind members to switch off their mobile phones or turn them to silent. When you are speaking, make sure you have your microphone on. And when you're not, make sure it's turned off. Before we start the agenda, I'd like just to point out that when we do have a vote, please could you raise your arms clearly so that we can capture the vote accurately. And before we start, I'd like the officers to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Chair. Tamara Dale, Principal Planning Officer in the Applications team.
Good evening, Giles Holbrook, Senior Planning Officer on the Majors Applications team.
Good evening, Emma Parks, the Head of Development and Building Control.
Claire Bryan, Principal Planning Solicitor.
Bradley Damon, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. Apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillor Bateman, Councillor Bainham, Councillor Beard, Councillor Circus, Councillor Dennis, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Fisher, Councillor Grech and Councillor Mark.
Thank you. To approve the minutes from the previous meeting, can I take them as approved? If I have a proposer on that, please. Thank you, Councillor Croker, the seconder. Thank you, Councillor Manton. All those agree that they're acceptable? Agree. Thank you. Okay. Declaration of members' interest.
Yes, I have spoken to Robert Mohammed previously, but I don't feel that my relationship with him will prejudice my voting in this matter at all.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Chair. I have a declaration of interest for item 7, Land at the Old Dairy, and for item 8, Lavender Cottage, as they are both under the same application.
Okay, and I understand that you'll be speaking from your seat on those ones as a ward councillor, but you will be then leave the room. Is that correct?
Yes, I was actually intending to go and speak from the public bench just to make it absolutely clear to councillors that I'm not involved in that particular decision.
Okay, thank you very much. Announcements from myself this evening, or from the chair, or chief exec. So appeals, to consider the appeals. Any of you comments on the appeals? No? Okay. Are there no comments? Okay, thank you very much. Item number 6, application for determination by committee, and this is DC 231177, Henfield Sports Centre, Northcroft, Henfield. And please could the officer present the application to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, of course. As mentioned, this is an application for the erection of 2 paddle tennis courts to the adjacent north of Henfield Leisure Centre within an area known as the King's Field, as described within the neighbour plan and known colloquially. The site, as shown on the application site, as shown on the slide before you, is defined by way of red outline. It encompasses the leisure centre together with the adjacent football pitches to the north. The site sits within the defined built-up area boundary for Henfield. The site further constitutes designated local green space as defined within the MPPF, and furthermore land as defined as a playing field. This is an aerial image intended to give a greater depiction of the site and its immediate surroundings. The area to receive the proposed paddle courts is roughly in shadow on the satellite imagery just to the north of the main leisure centre building. I've indicated the main separation to nearby dwellings. That's approximately 85 metres to dwellings on Parsonage Road to the east, and approximately 120 metres to dwellings on Deer Park. Starred, as it isn't completely obvious on the aerial imagery, are the locations of the two mini seven-a-side football pitches utilised by the Stenning Football Club, as marked out in white on the grass which exists on the playing field. Moving on to some photographs during my site visit. These are taken from the adjacent north, to the north of the site, adjacent to the youth centre, approximately from the access of Deer Park. You see obviously the leisure centre sitting off the left-hand side of the screen, with the paddle courts which would sit just to the front of that. This is the area of land to receive the proposed paddle courts, which approximately sits between the two car parks available to the leisure centre. It is solely laid to grass and maintained as such. There aren't any remarkable features to the immediate site setting. Just some further photos showing the site and its surroundings. So this is taken from the Henfield Leisure Centre car park, looking to the east towards Parsonage Road, with the trees available, or the trees present within the cemetery in the background. This is looking back towards Deer Park to the north of the site. Wish to draw members' attention to the presence of a hedge just to the adjacent to the site in the area of land to receive the proposed courts. That hedge has been identified as a potential commuting and foraging feature for bats. Is addressed within my report and the ecological statements, but I might return to that point later in this presentation. And this is the looking to the west, so approximately from the other direction. So moving on to the proposals, this plan shows their approximate layouts. They sit end to end, with the intention that the courts are firstly enclosed by a fence and glass enclosure, which is then topped by a separate steel supported polycarbonate roof canopy. As is shown on the plans on screen now. You can see that the intention is in effect for a polycarbonate canopy with a sort of typical green mesh court enclosure with glass panels to the rear of the individual courts. As you can note from the section at the top of the screen, the canopy does extend to a height of 8.5 metres, which sits just below the main eave of the leisure centre, which is approximately 60 centimetres or so higher. And this is a visual I've taken from the submitted design and access statement, basically intended just to give a visual impression of how the courts would look subsequent to completion. So officers consider that the proposed court and its respective enclosure are these in leisure centres, that they are appropriate in scale and design, that they are ultimately that they would not detract from local character and appearance, such as to comply with relevant design policy as addressed within my report, or our report. Of relevance to the proposal are the impacts of the development upon the availability of playing field land, and in particular the layout of the two adjacent football pitches as utilised by the football club. At present, just you can see at the bottom of the screen the intended siting of the proposed courts, which would be in very close proximity to the current positioning of a seven-a-side football pitch, and significantly within sufficient space to provide a runoff space, that's how it's defined, to prevent, in effect, conflict between the pitch and the proposed courts. The intention, therefore, is to reorientate the position of the westernmost football pitch such that it sits perpendicular to its current arrangement, sits east to west as shown on screen, which in effect would eliminate that risk and conflict between the two proposals. That proposal has been put to Sport England, who have confirmed that they have no objection to the proposed reorientation, and that the proposal would not diminish the quantity and or quality of playing pitch provision. Their response as the statutory consultee does carry significant weight in respect to the determination of that matter. The intention is to secure this reorientation by way of a Grampian style condition, noting that the football club have committed to work with the leisure centre to deliver the proposals within their latest representation. In effect, the operation of the Grampian style condition would prevent the commencement of development related to the proposed courts until the pitches have been reorientated and positioned as shown. Moving on to lighting aspects of the development. The intention is for a total of 8 floodlights to service the proposed courts, as would be stationed within the interior of the proposed canopy at a height of approximately 6 metres. The lighting effects of the proposal are assessed and addressed within a submitted lighting assessment. On screen here is the lighting contour plan showing in effect the lighting spread from the proposed floodlights, which isn't significant in the grand scheme. It wouldn't be expected to illuminate adjacent residential properties. It has been reviewed by specialist environmental health staff. They have confirmed their agreement with the conclusions and methodology of the lighting assessment, with no objections raised in that respect. Of significance to the lighting proposals, however, is the existence of the hedge which is adjacent to the proposed courts, and its significance for bat commuting and foraging. A preliminary ecological appraisal and roost assessment has been submitted in support of the proposals, and recommends the implementation of a low impact lighting scheme as part of the proposals in order to mitigate and to lessen the effects on the hedge for bat commuting and foraging. Those measures, i.e. low impact measures, which as identified within the preliminary ecological appraisal, include things like the installation of cowls and shields to the proposed floodlighting, are to be secured by way of condition, and would have the additional benefit of further limiting any other lighting impacts associated with the proposal. But in effect, the proposals subject to that condition are considered compliant with the requirements of HDPF policies 24 and 31. Moving on to matters of noise disturbance, a professionally conducted noise impact assessment has been provided in support of the proposed development. The output shown on the plan now is the acoustic contour plan as a result of the acoustic model that has been employed in the assessment. For context, this is the maximum anticipated noise events and their impact on neighbouring lands as modelled within the report. So it isn't necessarily deemed reflective of all operation. It's anticipating a worst case scenario as explained within the report. And it's measured against a 1 second interval, so it captures very discrete individual noise events, which of course is potentially significant for the nature of paddle court play and resultant noise disturbance. Members will note that the acoustic effect lessens as you move away from the proposals, but most significantly, those neighbouring properties on Parsonage Road, approximately 85 metres to the east, are not anticipated to be subject to unacceptable levels of disturbance, even in the worst case scenarios, not exceeding WHO or relevant additional sports guidance for noise levels. And some of those findings are shown on the screen now. So you can see here the main summary of acoustic findings at the top, showing the maximum predicted noise events to properties on Deer Park, Trench Close, Parsonage Road, anticipated approximately in the 40 to 45 decibel range, and averaged across a period of 1 hour, approximately 35 or 30 to 35. Those are well within guidelines as considered within in the environmental health response, who are satisfied that no adverse acoustic impact would result from the proposals, and that recommendation is accepted by officers, and therefore the proposal is considered in accordance with the requirements of Policy 33 and 24 in respect of disturbance to nearby occupiers of land. And just to finally, as one final note on the application, I just want to draw quick attention to one excerpt of the Sport England's comments. Sport England, in providing their response to this application, consulted with the Lawn Tennis Association, who advised of the availability of paddle facilities in the vicinity, noting there's only one other paddle court at the Triangle Leisure Centre in Burgess Hill, which is operating at 92% utilisation, obviously a very high level of use. The anecdotal evidence before the committee, in addition, from the number of representations and letters of support, is that there is an anecdotal need for facilities of this type. The proposed development would provide an additional sporting facility, a new sporting facility, additional capacity for paddle in the area, the recreational health and wellbeing benefits of which should be accorded significant weight within a determination pursuant to HDPF Policy 43, in addition to NPPF paragraphs 92 and 93. Overall, no conflict with development plan policy has been identified within the officer's assessment, with no material considerations identified which would warrant a refusal of planning permission as a departure from provisions of the development plan. The recommendation of officers, therefore, is to grant planning permission subject to relevant conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Anne Rodriguez to speak for 2 minutes. Thank you.
The planning officer's report fails to mention that the youth club is used during the week as a preschool for under fives. The primary school is the western boundary of the field. Appendix C of the acoustic assessment shows that the maximum sound level surrounding the youth club is between 50 and 55 decibels, well in excess of WHO guidelines for preschool children of 35 decibels for indoor areas and 30 decibels during sleeping time. WHO guidelines suggest the same levels for evening noise for homes. Appendix C shows that the rear of my property will be exposed to noise close to 50 decibels, well in excess of those guidelines. No modelling of evening noise has been done. I would suggest that the evening and daytime noise will be the same. I believe that the courts will have an adverse effect on my quality of life, leading me to close windows and doors when they would otherwise be open, due to a change in the acoustic nature of the area. No modelling has been done on how the courts will affect both schools. There are no noise mitigation measures within the plans. 50 decibels is equivalent to quiet conversation. Guidance emphasises quiet. This is totally unlike the repetitive thuds of balls hitting walls and fencing, plus the shouting of players in a game played as doubles on 2 courts. Are the acoustic assessment parameters industry standard, or have they been adjusted to get these results? 7 and 8 a.m. is far too early for them to start operating. Would you want to be woken up by this noise every day and denied a lie-in at the weekend? How will the behaviour and language of players be managed? How will they enforce the 9:30 curfew? It can't be. The courts are out of sight of the reception building and will be completely unsupervised. I hope that the committee will ignore the planning officer's recommendation and refuse this application because of the significant and observed adverse effects of this proposal on schools and residents. Otherwise, I ask you to defer your decision and ask for another acoustic assessment to include the schools because the current assessment is inadequate. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Adrian Hillman, please.
Thank you for inviting me or allowing me to come and speak. I am the chairman of the trustees of Henfield Leisure Centre. As I've said, me being the trustees, it's obviously a charitable trust. We're working really hard to make sure that the leisure centre can keep its doors open. Currently, we need to bring in £48,000 a month just to keep the doors open. We see the introduction of paddle as an opportunity for us to secure the finances of the leisure centre, therefore stopping us having to go cap in hand for grants and charitable money to keep the place going. The next speaker has got a lot of facts and figures about the costs. We've been dealing with this for about 18 months now, and the head of sports development within Horsham District Council was very, very keen for us to apply for the application to erect the paddle courts in the first place. We currently have a grant of £75,000, an REPG grant, which is sitting there subject to this planning application being approved. We're confident we can fund the construction of the courts without any impact on the current finances of the leisure centre via interest-free loan from the Lawn Tennis Association. We get interest-free loan because we're a registered charity, so therefore the repayment on that is very favourable to us. And as I said, Rob will give you the facts and figures in a moment. But more to that, we have done all we can with the siting of it to alleviate the noise. It's built right behind, as you saw in the drawings, it's right behind the current leisure centre. The nearest dwellings to where the courts are actually on the other side of the leisure centre and are actually much closer to the tennis courts, which are in use, I think, until 10 p.m. most nights under floodlights. We understand that there will be a condition on this plan application which would restrict weekend use to a 5 p.m. shut-off, which we've got no problem with whatsoever.
Mr. Hillman, could I ask that you bring your comments to a conclusion, please?
Yeah. So in conclusion, what I'm asking is for you to approve the application just really for the long-term financial security of the centre. It's a community project. We have kids from a few months old up to people in their 90s come and use it, and this would be a valuable asset for us to have. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Okay, Robert Mohammed.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me the opportunity to speak. We've been working on paddle for about 18 months. We spotted the opportunity middle of last year. We've gone down the rabbit hole. We've done a lot of investigative work in terms of noise, lighting, and productivity. Without doubt, paddle is the fastest growing sport in the world. There is no question about that. All the statistics justify that. The demand for paddle within our district is driven by an accessibility to capture former tennis squash players who are much older now, but still want to retain a level of fitness. We're seeing paddle courts across the country that are being created and built off the back of existing tennis clubs. You've got over 2,000 tennis clubs at the moment. You've got iconic tennis clubs such as Esher, Hurlingham, that are building and creating paddle courts on unused or underutilised tennis courts at the moment. The LTA, who's become the godfather of Paddle UK, estimates by 2026 there's going to be 600,000 paddle players across the whole country. Now, that is not a statistic that you can ignore, but it's based on scientific fact and market research. I believe the concerns about noise are generally misunderstood. The panels around each paddle court contain noise suppressant glass paddling, which reduce the noise by 60-65% from what the acoustic levels actually show. We've got an opportunity as a community leisure centre to actually seize a seismic opportunity to create the financial security and sustainability of a community leisure centre for everyone. We don't want to create a private club where you pay a membership and come and play. It's going to be on a pay-per-play basis. The cut-off time at 5 p.m. over the weekends, we hoped, would help the surrounding neighbourhood in terms of any concerns about noise. We've remained a pretty vibrant and active community hub. We cover a multitude of different functions.
Mr. Mohammed, could I ask you to bring your comments to conclusion, please?
Sorry, yes, okay. So we want to be the first choice to develop a community centre. The income stream from paddle will allow us to grow, develop and build an opportunity and a platform for younger people who want to enter the health and leisure industry as well. We want to be proactive, not reactive. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to comment or offer a few matters of clarification in response to some of the speaker remarks. The first was that a suggestion that the hours of use condition would prove unenforceable by the local planning authority. Members should be aware that requirements of paragraph 56 have been considered in the context of the current proposal. The condition is precisely worded, it is necessary, it is enforceable by the local planning authority, who is the obligation would fall upon, not upon representatives of the leisure centre to enforce. I don't see any issue with the wording of that condition. It's exactly how you'd expect an hours of use condition to be worded. Secondly, in terms of the failure to assess nighttime evening hours, which is what assessed, members need to note that the proposal is purely for daytime use, as characterised within the noise policy statement for England. There is no operation up beyond 11 p.m. at night, in fact, as well before that, both at weekdays and on weekends. That is the reason why guidelines for nighttime noise disturbance, in fact, haven't been considered. It's because they aren't relevant in this instance. Lastly, as to impacts upon the preschool, which sits to the north of the site, I think all I would offer at this point, it's that it's only indicated to be affected by the maximum possible, so i.e. the worst possible sound event in the shortest discrete time frame, which is not necessarily reflective of play over a period of time, at over 50 decibels. That decibel limit as well does not take account of the built mitigation or built fabric of the nursery building itself. The ambient noise propagation plan included with the acoustic assessment, which shows an average of expected noise disturbance over a period of an hour, so more typical of a typical play, shows no impact. So I think in that respect, the proposal still remains acceptable in respect of its effect upon neighbouring occupiers and users of land. Thank you.
Thank you. Ask the local ward member to if they have any comments.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I don't really think there's a huge amount left to say. Our officer has made a compelling case for approval, and the speakers have spoken eloquently and eruditely about the contribution paddle tennis will make, not just to the much cherished Henfield Leisure Centre, a self-funded charity that provides so much, but to the wider community of Henfield and beyond as well. Paddle offers a versatile and inclusive sport that can be enjoyed by people of various ages and skill levels. The courts are compact, maximising the use of limited space, and the sport's growing popularity worldwide suggests that introducing paddle facilities will attract new players and boost community involvement in sports and recreational activities, something so important for physical and mental well-being and a key tenet of our planning framework. I appreciate the concerns of residents, but I believe there is sufficient mitigation in place, and a plethora of conditions will ensure that local fears do not materialise, or at the very least are kept to an absolute minimum. I will listen to the thoughts of other members, and if the chairman allows, I might make further comment accordingly. I haven't played paddle, but regardless of whether or not members vote to approve this application, I challenge anyone to a game. perhaps Councillor Knoll might be more amenable to a game rather than accept my challenge on the tennis court. There's no more excuses on the paddle tennis court. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Potts, and that's something we'd like to record if it does happen. Okay. I will come back to you in a moment when others had their chance to speak. Thank you, Councillor Potts. Yes, Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Chairman. This is not in direct reply to Councillor Potts, because I firmly believe that Henfield needs paddle courts. In fact, every sporting area in the country needs paddle courts because of its sudden sorry, I can't say the word. Rapid rise in popularity. I myself do want to play paddle, and I'm dying for these courts to come forth because I really want to start playing it. I understand that the triangle courts are also very close to local residents, and yet I've heard no complaints in mid-Sussex about excess noise as a result of having the paddle courts, the triangle. Just to absolutely make sure of this, can I just see the slide of the decibel illustration, please? I'm trying to see what houses, I can't see any houses within the area that may be affected by that sound. And as it has also been pointed out that the screening effectively reduces that by 50%, I really can't see any problems with any residents. So therefore, I would support this wholeheartedly. And if it does come to pass, I will take up Councillor Potts on his challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Any other councillors wish to make? So I don't know who was first, but Councillor.
Just a comment really on that slide. It's interesting that the hedge doesn't seem to in any way buffer the sound. Just if it's any consolation, you might find that the sound won't be even as bad as being suggested there.
Thank you, Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Chair. I have actually played paddle, and I think it's particularly good because it's extremely easy to play, unlike tennis, which I also like. But tennis does require a bit of skill before you stop having to walk around picking up the ball all the time. And paddle is excellent. It's young and old. It's amazing. Yeah, anyone can seem to just get out there and play it straight away. So I do think it's a really good game, and I can see why it's taken off. I played it in Spain, and my hotel room happened to be very close to the course, and it didn't bother me, the noise. And to be honest, I didn't hear it. But I am in favour of it, and I think we'll see more across Horsham District as well in the coming years. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Troller, yes.
Not an opinion, just a question. The noise report, does it, when you talk about the worst case, does that take into consideration noise, environmental conditions, particularly wind, the atmospheric pressure, etc.?
Thank you. So for the purposes of the noise propagation plan, it doesn't take account of those types of circumstances, because what it's trying to show is, in the absence of any other environmental factors, what you might expect the noise impact to be. As a clarification of what the maximum noise level event is, as I understand from my reading of the acoustic assessment, is that is derived from the ball being struck particularly hard during a game which was recorded by the acousticians elsewhere, and they've used the various measurements they took during that session of play to inform the model which was derived upon. The noise propagation plan is showing, if that maximum recorded sound event occurred here, what the impact would be across a period. So effectively, it's just showing the impact of that one noise event, not the entirety of play over the length of a game or the period of a day, etc., which you'd expect to be less, because of course averages mean that there are a greater number of average or lesser noise events which would have been recorded. So I hope that helps in its understanding.
I think so. Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Councillor Manton, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just for my own understanding, if you'll just bear with me a little bit, you talked earlier about the orientation of one of the courts changing, and you said the Western Court. Can we just pull that slide up? Yeah, the football field. Yes, sorry, the football field. The orientation is being changed, which are the two large red squares above where the paddle courts are proposed to be. When you refer to the Western football pitch being reorientated, are we talking about the one to the left or the one to the right? Is there a north or south pointer on that plan?
Yes, I may have misspoken. Hearing you now, I wonder if I perhaps said the court and they meant pitch, and then perhaps got my compass points mixed up. To clarify, it is the football pitches which are proposed to be reorientated to accommodate the proposed courts, and it is the right-hand pitch which would be reorientated to accommodate the proposals. It's that's to the direct north of the proposed courts. The one slightly off to the side doesn't need to change because there's enough room. So
it's the eastern pitch that is
correct.
changing. So if it changes orientation, then its boundary would come that much closer to the proposed paddle pitches.
No, that's not quite correct because what happens at the moment is the two football pitches are currently orientated north to south and they sit adjacent to each other. So the current arrangement has the paddle courts just almost on the complete corner of the existing pitch. So the reason they need to be reorientated the pitch needs to be reorientated in effect is to prevent any conflict between the playing pitch and the proposed courts. I hope that makes sense.
Forgive me, planning officer. That is the new orientation.
Yes, that's correct.
Sorry, it wasn't made clear. That is the new orientation. Right. So I can now see a greater distance to the paddle courts. Thank you. Some mention I was going to raise a point on sound absorbent material until I heard Mr. Mohammed talk about glass panels are already included. Again, forgive my ignorance. I know that John will know more about this, being more sporting than I am. Tennis courts have hatched wire round them. Sound just goes through them. I sort of thought these paddle courts would have the same sort of thing, but from that I can't really see glass. You wouldn't see glass, would you? So how big is that? So that's the roof, yes, and the panels at the bottom are what sort of height?
In terms of height, I might need to come back to that in just a moment, if that's okay. To explain, the glass panelling sits at the end of the courts, so it doesn't fully encompass the courts. There's a section of fencing in the sort of central side portions of the courts. On the bottom plan, which is the elevations, this shows it better. So you can see here, this is the end of the court as shown on the elevation. So
that's glass.
Entirely glass. And then as you come round to the side, you have a small section of glass just as it comes out from the end, but then a much larger proportion of fencing.
Fencing of what material?
It would just be metal fence. It wouldn't provide any
metal.
Yeah, it wouldn't.
So it would reverberate quite a bit.
I imagine that from a court of this nature, I wouldn't necessarily expect the fencing to attenuate the noise, but I equally wouldn't necessarily expect it to contribute.
I'm just wondering if we could if they could put on some sort of rubberized material or some other material, softer material that would absorb sound.
Ultimately, members, I think if you feel that having details of the materials is necessary to make the development acceptable, then it is open to you to require, say, a spec to be submitted. Ultimately, the officer's view is, and as demonstrated by the noise assessment, that it is acceptable in any event. It doesn't require materials to mitigate the impact. Obviously we did hear from the speaker, so if you feel that is necessary, we can add an additional condition in so that spec is submitted prior to the commencement of development. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if we could add a condition to perhaps enhance the the sound deadening at the side. I'm also just a little concerned about the start time in the morning. I know that, again, if I was there and there was a noise, and I'm not saying there is, but there was a noise, starting at 7 o'clock in the morning would be quite wearing, and 8 o'clock on a weekend when you're trying to lie in would be quite wearing. I wondered whether the sports centre would consider slightly later start.
In that respect, I would say, obviously, we have discussed this and consulted with the environmental health officer. I think we just have to be mindful about changing timescales, which then may have an impact on the availability of the paddle courts and the aspirations of the leisure centre in terms of fee income, etc. I think if members can feel it's necessary to make the development acceptable to have a later opening, then that is open to you. But the officer's view is, and having discussed with environmental health, that the hours are set out within the recommended condition 10 are acceptable. Thank you.
Councillor Mill.
Thank you, Chair. Just with regards to Councillor Manton's point, as I understand it, and I'll take correction from the public, the fencing it's not solid. It's not solid metal. It's mainly air. So the materials don't really make any difference. It's a wire mesh fence. So it doesn't, whether it was made of whatever it was made of makes no difference. It's basically air. Is that correct?
Sorry, we shouldn't engage with the public. Excuse me, sorry, members, we shouldn't be engaging with the public. Sorry. Okay. Councillor Croker.
Thank you, Chair. If I may come back on the noise or the acoustic side of things, in some respects it doesn't matter what the court's made of, because as I understand the acoustic report, the modelling has been done based on measurements made outside of a similar court in operation. So I don't think that's really relevant, but if it gives some reassurance to members to have that kind of detail put in, then I guess it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Croker. Yeah. Councillor Clark, apologies, I missed your hand, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. As a matter of curiosity, when I read paragraph 6.34, it says the proposed courts are proposed to be utilised solely within statutory daytime hours and not beyond 21:30 on weekdays and 1700 on weekends, bank and public holidays. It says so in the conditions as well. It piqued my curiosity because you said this is daytime operation only. Well, 4 p.m. in December is dark. So is statutory daytime hours a definition, a legal definition? And if it is, could you please remind me what it is? Because I've looked at the conditions at the back, which is 9 and 10, and I'm just concerned about the light pollution that would come from the operation of the courts after, let's say, 4 p.m. on a weekday when you've got operating hours until 21:30. So can you please remind me what that statutory daytime hour is and whether it bears resemblance to reality? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you. So to clarify, daytime hours as defined aren't by what you and me as individuals would experience in terms of hours of darkness. Statutory nighttime is between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. Outside of those hours, the national noise policy statement for England sets a range of requirements for daytime noise disturbance. And that might include 9 p.m. at the evening, but it's still considered to be daytime for the purposes of relevant policy. So I hope that answers your question in terms of what we might experience and the reason why daytime hours are discussed within my report.
Not really. I was thinking about light, actually, not sound. That's where I was coming from, was light.
Yes.
And is it the same?
Well, I'm not aware of any specific guidelines in terms of the acceptability of light disturbance upon nighttime or daytime hours specifically. But what I would say is, of course, the proposal has been considered in the context of its expected disturbance upon local amenity and local neighbouring occupiers of land in terms of the potential for disturbance from light pollution, and in addition the potential effects of lighting pollution upon local character, and it has been considered to be acceptable in both of those regards. So in that regard, the officer recommendation is that there isn't a reason to refuse planning permission, for even though there may be some character impact as a consequence of the installation of lighting.
Thank you.
Councillor Potts.
Thank you, Chair. I have no further comment other than to withdraw my challenge to Councillor Milne. He's clearly a dab hand, given his warm weather training camp. Thank you.
Okay. Before I go to the vote, I have been asked by the monitoring officer that we should have a proposer and a seconder on this, and the recommendation is to approve full planning permission subject to appropriate conditions listed in the committee planning report. So do I have a proposer for this recommendation? Good. Thank you. Seconder? Good. So can we vote on this, please? All those for take the recommendation to approve full planning, please show your hands, arms. Okay. All those against?
Unanimous.
Oh, unanimous. Okay, sorry. Okay, therefore, the recommendation is that the planning application is approved, subject to the appropriate conditions listed in the committee planning report. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 7, which is DC 23-1594, land at the Old Dairy, Blackstone Gate Farm, Henfield Road, Aldbourne. Please could the officer make the presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this application seeks full planning permission for the change of use of the land for mixed use as a dog daycare, overnight boarding of dogs and equestrian use, along with the erection of a grooming building operated as ancillary to the dog daycare business, and the erection of a stable building for mixed equestrian and dog daycare purposes. The development has been carried out and the application is retrospective. So the application site, as shown by the red outline, is located to the west of Henfield Road, outside of any designated built-up area boundary. The site is therefore within the countryside in policy terms. Several properties are located to the north and east of the application site, with the wider surroundings comprising open fields and woodland. So here's the aerial photo showing the site in the context of the immediate surroundings, including the residential properties to the north and east. So the site comprises an existing residential dwelling known as Old Dairy East Cottage, which is highlighted here where my cursor is, and this is used for the overnight boarding. Several buildings used for a mix of equestrian and dog daycare purposes are located over here. And the former sand school and paddocks are now used as exercise fields, so located as annotated. An unauthorised residential dwelling known as Lavender Cottage is located to the north of the site here and is subject of a planning application under reference DC 23-1595 to follow. Access is provided from the west, which passes in close proximity to a number of residential properties, with parking provided to the western section of the site, shown here. The parking area is shared by the dog daycare business and the unauthorised dwelling. There are concerns that the area of land available for parking would be limited, particularly when considering the cumulative needs of the business and the needs of the unauthorised dwelling. So here are the floor and elevation plans of the dog grooming business. This also operates as a reception area for pick-up and drop-off of the dogs. And here are the floor and elevation plans of the stable building, which is proposed to be used for a mix of equestrian and dog daycare purposes. These are the site photos showing the access from Henfield Road, the relationship with the neighbouring properties, the exercise fields and the collection of buildings. So the application seeks to regularise the activities taking place on the land, which includes dog daycare and boarding services, along with grooming services. The business benefits from a licence which allows daycare services for up to 20 dogs, with a boarding licence specific to the dwelling known as Old Dairy East, which is located within the red outline, allowing overnight stays for up to 12 dogs. The dog grooming activities run in conjunction with the daycare services, with the majority of dogs groomed also present at the site for daycare and boarding. The new stable building is used for a mixed purpose of equestrian and will be used for the stabling of the applicant's horses. The development does provide a service to the rural locality and contributes to the wider rural economy. The uses are not unexpected within a rural locality and contribute to sustainable rural development. There are, however, concerns regarding the level of parking provision, particularly given the cumulative needs of the business and the unauthorised dwelling, subject of the separate application. And it has not been demonstrated to the satisfaction of the local planning authority that sufficient parking would be available to meet the needs of anticipated users. In addition, as outlined within paragraphs 6.43 to 6.51 of the committee report, insufficient information has been demonstrated to provide, in regard to water demand arising from the development, and it has not been possible to conclude with certainty that the development would not result in a likely significant effect on the Arun Valley protected sites. The benefits arising from the development would not therefore outweigh the harm as identified, and the development is therefore recommended for refusal for the reasons outlined within section 7 of the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I invite Sam Ichkus to speak for 2 minutes, please? And apologies if I mispronounce your surname.
It's pronounced Ichkus.
Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. I must stress that this application relates solely to the use of land and stables for the keeping of dogs associated with the business and the provision of a grooming parlour. The business itself has been established for some 8 years and is not the subject of the application. Parking concerns were not raised by the council's highways consultee, and there have been no parking issues at the site since the business developed many years ago. The yard area that was formerly an equestrian use benefits from large areas of hard standing that are currently used by customers and residents without any conflict. Based on looking at the site today, I would suggest perhaps 6 to 7 parking spaces. A site visit by councillors would make it immediately clear that parking is simply a non-issue. In respect of water neutrality, it has been suggested that we must consider the water needs of dogs, staff and the grooming parlour. The daycare and boarding of dogs has been established at the site for 8 years and is not the subject of this application. We believe this is a misunderstanding of the proposal and the scope of what can be considered under the requirement of water neutrality. The dogs will remain at the site if this application is turned down. They simply will not be able to use the associated land or the stables and will have to remain confined to residential gardens. As such, there is no increased water usage relating solely to dogs as a result of the proposal. The only increase in water is from the proposed grooming parlour. However, grooming has taken place historically. Furthermore, through the use of a rainwater harvesting tank, as detailed in the application, the grooming parlour is water neutral. In any event, the historic use of the site by horses, which were displaced by the business, is of clear relevance. The applicant's records show they kept up to 8 horses at the site. Each horse was given 1 to 2 40-litre buckets of drinking water each day. We've estimated that historic water usage, including water used for washing down horses, was at least 450 litres per day. The current use with 1 horse on site is just 94.25 litres per day. 24 litres of this is attributed to the grooming parlour and will be offset with the rainwater harvesting tank. A condition is suggested to control the number of horses on site to no more than 2. On this basis, there are no water neutrality issues. Parking is plentiful, and the suggested reasons for refusal are based on a misunderstanding of the application. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to come back at the end? Okay. Tom Spinks.
Hi there. So I don't actually have comments on this one. Mine is to the next one, which ends in 9.5.
Apologies.
No.
If you could wait till the next one then, please. And I'm assuming that Julie Copeland is going to speak on this one.
I'm the landowner of the old dairy and the land in question, and I'm the mother of the applicant Caroline Copeland. We've lived at the old dairy for more than 25 years, and during that time, prior to being doggy daycare, we operated an equestrian business equestrian use for 22 years. We bred our own horses, regularly had more than 8 on the site. The water uses was immense. Easily, I would say 10 times what we're looking at today. Caroline has been grooming the dogs on the site for 10 years, using an outbuilding. She only moved to the reception area when it was put in this year. Caroline has, over the last 8 years, built a rural dog care business, increasing in revenue yearly, supports herself and her 3 children, and now employs 2 other people. My point being here that neither the grooming or the dog care is new to the site. So it's not new use of water and should not really be part of the water neutrality assessment. Her move to doggy daycare and home boarding away from equestrian activity has substantially reduced the use of water, not increased it. She provides an essential service in this rural area to her customers, amongst whom doctors, nurses, police, everyone, parish people. They're all part of the 30% of households in Sussex that now own 1 or more dogs and want them cared for in this type of setting, with the opportunity to run on secure fields. We're not a kennels and we never intend to be. There are no parish council objections to the change of use of the land. It's also worth mentioning that in the 5 years Caroline has been operating under Horsham District Council licence, she never was made aware that we couldn't continue to use the land, even with several visits from HDC. Regarding parking, dog day customers don't park and stay. We operate a staggered drop-off system, pickups from 3 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. and drop-offs from 7 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. The car park is no longer used for large horse boxes, and our personal vehicles are parked away from the main car parking area to allow for customers to come in and drop their dog, turn around and leave. We've had no parking issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points to note. obviously members are aware that Horsham can determine the level of parking that is appropriate for a site, and it's not the case of an absence of County Highways comments that we can't raise concerns in terms of parking. Ultimately, parking is often an amenity issue, and it's whether there is sufficient parking. In this case, as you can see on the plan, the area designated for parking is relatively small, and that area is to accommodate parking for the business as well as the dwelling subject to the second application. It's officers' view that, as currently shown on the plans, there is insufficient space for the level of parking necessary. In terms of water neutrality, I think it should be noted that officers are not saying that it may not be possible to demonstrate water neutrality. Water neutrality, you have to have certainty over the evidence before you. The water neutrality statement as submitted makes a number of assumptions. It's not backed up by evidence. We need evidence to demonstrate actual water use related to baseline and related to proposed water use in order to provide that certainty. It's unlikely to be the case that historic water use some time ago can be used as a baseline. Equally, just because you have a number of stables doesn't mean they were occupied by horses. You would have to demonstrate that number of horses were there, they used X amount of water, this is the evidence the horses are there, or this is the water bills. We don't have enough evidence to demonstrate that the business is water neutral. And in terms of what we are seeking to demonstrate, ultimately the application needs to demonstrate water neutrality for what is applied for, and the description of development is erection of a dog grooming reception building, erection of a stable building for mixed equestrian and dog daycare, change of use of land for exercising dogs and boarding and associated works. So it is that information that is required to demonstrate water neutrality. Now, if there were previous activities on the site that were lawful, that can effectively discount against that, then that's something for the applicant to demonstrate, but we do not have that. I hope that's assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. I will invite the local ward members, starting with Councillor Knoll.
He's not speaking as a ward member, I don't think.
But apologies, you were not speaking as a ward member, I understand.
No, Chairman, I'm not.
Apologies.
Good afternoon. Just to make it clear, I'm now sitting as a member of the public, as I have a declared interest in this application. I want to draw attention to the fact that this is more of a change of use from an existing equestrian facility which has been in existence in this same family and at these premises for over 20 years, with full planning consent. It also includes the addition of a very small ancillary building and a barn presently used for stables. During this time, on occasions up to 20 horses at any single point were catered for together with watering, grooming and training, and the business would have consumed far more water, had many more visitors, and had many more vehicle movements each day for horse boxes, farm machinery and deliveries. I know the present business well, which is now a mother and daughter business with 2 other helpers, and it is a far quieter affair than it ever was before. Our planning officer has concluded that there is not sufficient parking to support the business. If you look at the plan illustrated on the screens now, you see the applicants did not appreciate this objection and are perfectly prepared to allow the largely disused field or fields, which are all part of this small holding, to become an overflow parking area. I visited again this afternoon to check these facts, and it seems there has been a misunderstanding between our planning team, the family, and their agent, therefore producing a very weak planning application. The applicants rely on this business to run the small holding and have possibly misunderstood what was required of them. They have been running a fully HDC licensed dog care business there for over 8 years. So it's just a matter of looking at the refusal recommendations on page 49. Number 1, the parking situation can easily be overcome by providing extra space so they can come back with a revised application. 2, I make the clear point that these applicants were misadvised on their choice of agent and the water neutrality statement was not properly prepared. Water neutrality can be proved to be perfectly adequate for this operation.
Mr. Knoll,
Therefore,
can I ask you to
please consider deferring this operation. Please consider deferring this application. Thank you very much.
Councillor Croker.
Thank you, Chair. Reading through this and the subsequent application yesterday, it's quite clear that the water neutrality situation has been confused, to put it mildly, and I fully support the officers in their quest for some clarity in this area. So much like my ward member, who spoke as a member of the public, I would also prefer that this proposal is deferred, so that to give the applicants time to sort out their water neutrality statement for this application alone, and if need be, a separate water neutrality statement for the other application that we'll be talking about in a minute. However, I'm aware that deferring now would stop the debate, so I will take advice on whether to propose that now or wait till other members have had a chance to have their say. Thank you.
Do other members want to make points in relation to this application? Councillor Trollope, I'll come back to you.
I was actually going to make the same point that it would seem advisable to defer this to allow a proper study or the proper representations to be made.
Thank you. There's a few. I'll come back to Councillor Lambert.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask the officers, if the horses were there 8 years ago, could that be taken into account for water neutrality or not? It seems a long while ago to me. And why are there not bills for water usage?
The Natural England FAQ suggests a period of 3 years in terms of providing a baseline evidence. So it's unlikely that if that water use was 8 years ago, that it could be used as a baseline. If it was in the recent past, the last few years, then it is likely that it can be included if we've got evidence of what that is in some form.
Okay, so without evidence, it's too long ago to take into account in any case?
I think yes, in any event, yes.
So we only have what we have in front of us?
Yeah. Well, in terms of if we made a decision today, yes, we do. If members choose to defer it, it may be the case that the applicants have additional evidence they can submit, but obviously I don't have that to be able to say whether that's the case or not and whether that would change the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ball, I think you had it. Vanderbilt, you had it. Okay. So we had. Sorry, Councillor Clark. Yes, I didn't see you again. Sorry.
Sorry, having read the water neutrality statement at length and asked the officers for help, because this one I couldn't understand because it was so confusing and badly written, I would fully support a deferment of this proposal if it comes forward.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Just one moment, please, Councillor Croker. Thank you. Yes. Sorry, Councillor Croker.
In which case, I would propose that this application is deferred.
Councillor Croker, can I just clarify what your motion is? What are your reasons for deferral, just so we're all clear?
The absence of clarity with regarding water neutrality for this application.
Yeah, the officers are recommending.
And parking. Voice reminder me.
Thank you.
We have a seconder for that.
Councillor Potts.
Did you want to speak, or you were just?
I'm just happy to second that, Chairman.
So before we go to a vote, the proposal is that we defer for water neutrality and parking. We've had a proposer and a second. Therefore, the vote, please.
I'm sorry, but for how long? We haven't stated for how long the deferment is.
Generally, when members defer at committee, you don't state a timeline. Ultimately, it's a case of providing a reasonable timeframe for the applicant to collate additional information for officers to consider it and bring it back. Usually that's at least 2 committee cycles because of the lead-in times, but you don't have to state a timeframe when you're deferring it. The officers will bring it back to committee.
My apologies, a mistake.
That's okay. Thank you. So all those for deferring this as per the proposal by Councillor Croker. Unanimous. That was unanimous, and therefore the application is deferred as per the proposal by Councillor Croker. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Item number 8, DC 231595, Lavender Cottage, Blackstone Gate Farm, Henfield, Aldbourne. Please could I ask the officer to make the presentation to the committee?
Thank you, Chair. So this application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a 3-bed residential dwelling. The development has been carried out and the application is therefore retrospective. Since the publication of the committee report, a response has been received from Nature Space, where it has been concluded that there would be no likely impact on great crested newts or their habitat. Additional comments have also been received, stating that the water usage for the dwelling would be less than the former equestrian use, and that the dwelling would be occupied by a worker associated by the business operated from the wider site. Officers note that the planning statement makes reference to this, but do not consider that there is an essential need, as the business operates as a daycare centre between the hours of 7:30 and 6 p.m, as indicated by the application form, and that there is an existing dwelling within the same ownership, which is licensed for dog boarding purposes. As such, the officer's view is that there is no need for an additional dwelling on the site to support the business. So the application site is shown by the red outline, and it is located to the west of Henfield Road, outside of any designated built-up area boundary. The site is therefore in the countryside in policy terms. Several properties are located to the east and west of the application site, and the wider surroundings comprise open fields and woodland. The land immediately to the south and west of the site is used for a mixed purpose of including dog daycare, grooming and boarding, in addition to the keeping of horses. So again, here's the aerial photo which shows the context of the site and the immediate surroundings, including the residential properties. So the site comprises an unauthorised residential dwelling known as Lavender Cottage, located to the north. A number of other buildings are located in proximity to this. These are utilised for equestrian, dog care and grooming purposes, subject to the earlier application. And the site is bound by trees and hedging to the north, with the eastern boundary defined by close bordered fencing. Access is provided from the west, which passes a number of residential properties, with parking to the western section of the site, and this is shared by the dog care business. Again, there are concerns that the area of land available would be limited for parking purposes, particularly when considering the cumulative needs of the unauthorised dwelling and the business. There are also concerns that the immediate proximity of the dwelling to the dog daycare and equestrian activities, where no formal assessment has been undertaken and no mitigation measures to address noise and odour recommended, that there would be harm to the amenity of future occupiers. It is not therefore being demonstrated to the satisfaction of officers that the dwelling would not be adversely impacted by noise and associated activity. So here are the floor and elevation plans of the dwelling. And these are the site photos, including the access from Henfield Road and the relationship with the adjacent buildings. So the application seeks the retention of a 3-bed residential dwelling located on a site outside of the built-up area and not allocated for development. It has not been satisfactorily demonstrated that the dwelling is essential to its countryside location, nor that it would meet any of the other criteria under the relevant policies of the Horsham District Planning Framework. It has not been demonstrated to the satisfaction that the development would not be adversely impacted by noise and disturbance arising from the nearby activities, nor that sufficient parking to meet the needs of anticipated users cumulatively would be met. And this weighs significantly against the grant of planning permission. Furthermore, as outlined within paragraphs 6.40 and 6.44 of the committee report, insufficient information has been provided to demonstrate the water demand arising for the development, and it is not possible to conclude with certainty that it would not adversely impact the Arun Valley protected sites. The council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites. Therefore, for the purposes of decision making, the presumption in favour of sustainable development under paragraph 11D of the MPPF applies. However, as insufficient information has been provided to demonstrate that there would be no adverse effects upon the integrity of the Arun Valley protected sites, this paragraph is not engaged in this instance. While the current housing shortfall is a material consideration of significant weight, and the suggested needs of the business are acknowledged, it is not considered that these would be significantly and demonstrably outweighed by the benefits. The application is therefore recommended for refusal for the reasons outlined within section 7 of the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to pause for a moment, I just need to ask something of the lawyer, get some clarity on something. Thank you. Okay, apologies for that delay. Let's call on the first public speakers. Sam Eachus, if you could speak again. Thank you.
Councillors, the planning history for the site includes an approved application for a holiday let. As such, this is a brownfield site and had planning permission for effectively a controlled residential use. In planning terms, the only assessment that needs to be made is whether a dwelling for a long-term local resident to run an important local business is acceptable instead of a holiday let. Councillors should also be aware that the LPA cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing and land supply. The location for the purposes of running the business as a live-work premises is the most sustainable location possible. Furthermore, the nature of the applicant's business necessitates that they live on site. The business cares for dogs that cannot stay in a typical kennels due to health conditions, and the applicant's mother cannot be held responsible for looking after the dogs. A condition limiting the occupation of the dwelling to someone employed in the business has been proposed to the case officer. In respect of water neutrality, it is important to take into account potential water usage of the holiday let, which was approved, which would have been 110 litres per person per day as previously agreed through a discharge of conditions. Furthermore, as previously stated, the business has displaced many horses. A condition to limit the number of horses has been proposed. Finally, I urge councillors to have due regard to policy 17 of the local plan, which makes provision for greenfield land to be given up for housing where there is a local need. Specifically, the policy supports housing for existing residents whose accommodation was unsuitable and need to live in the parish to provide an important service. Both apply in this case, with the applicant having to move out of her parents' house due to a gas leak and then outgrowing their family home due to having their own family. The added benefit in this case is the use of brownfield land. An occupancy condition will ensure the property remains affordable. We urge councillors to support this long-established family to continue residing at their place of work so they can continue to offer an important local service to residents.
Thank you. Do you want to come back? Okay. Hopefully this time, Tom Spinks.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. So I live in the West Cottage, so next to the East Cottage and very close to Lavender Cottage. We moved there in June this year, so obviously prior to moving that, the doggy daycare was an established business, and we knew that moving in. We did have some concerns around potential noise before buying the property and obviously living next to a daycare. I can honestly say that it's been totally worth any potential risk, and we've been very happy there. There's little to no noise coming from the business and from the cottage, including the neighbouring site. This includes us being in the garden over the summer, being outside and not hearing anything. So the business mention are always very conscious about any potential noise and ask us if there's any issues, and I can honestly say we've had no complaints. I believe we are the closest to Lavender Cottage, so if we're unable to hear any of the noise, then I don't suspect that any of other neighbours should hear that either. We had a newborn baby this year whilst being at the old dairy. So we're up a lot in the night time, and can honestly say we're not hearing any additional noise from where other than the baby crying, obviously. We're now very settled as a family, and we don't want any change to the current situation, including a holiday let, which for me would create potential more noise. So therefore request that the planning is approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie Copeland.
Having now read the planning report, I think I now have a better understanding of the points made for a recommended refusal and could address them all given time. I haven't had time to collect all the relevant information, but will do so. I have last week provided planning with some initial information. With regard to water neutrality, we will be adhering to the new recommendations for water usage for the dwelling and have evidence that proves a significant reduction in water usage compared to the historic use of the dwelling, which was to stable horses. The dwelling conforms to the new Horsham District Local Plan Policy 21 for rural workers accommodation, which states that outside the defined built-up area, new housing for rural workers will be supported, provided that criteria are met, which Caroline definitely will meet. Also, Policy 20 of the current Horsham District Local Plan is relevant. There may sometimes, however, be special circumstances where it is essential for a rural worker to live permanently at or near their place of work and therefore help to support the rural economy. Caroline needs to stay on site to provide the requisite care that the dogs need. I can no longer do that physically, and she is very much essential to the business 24/7. The dwelling has no council objections. On sustainability, a note has been provided. The dwelling was built with conversion planning permission initially and uses no more allocated land as it replaces stables that were in existence for 23 years on the exact same footprint. It has been built with all net zero carbon aims, locally sourced materials, insulation, air source heat pump, low electric lighting consumption, and locally sourced wood cladding. By living on site, Caroline isn't constantly driving to and from her place of work, thereby reducing her carbon footprint. Caroline is providing a much needed essential service in the community with increasing customer demand and is a growing model for dog daycare developing in the economy. Customers expect someone living on site to attend to their dogs at all times whilst they are at work or on holiday. Moreover, customers testify that no other services of this type and quality is available locally. In essence, I'm asking you to allow a change of use of the holiday let to rural worker accommodation and allow my daughter and her family to continue living and working on the family property and in the parish where she's lived for the past 25 years. For 8 of those years, establishing a much needed rural dog care business and supporting the local economy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's important to note that this application is for a new build dwelling. There was a previous planning approval on the site for the conversion of a stable building to a holiday let. However, following a compliance investigation, it was found that those stables had been demolished and this is a new build dwelling. In terms of the policy considerations for a holiday let, obviously they are generally, tourist accommodation is generally supported within our local plan policies, particularly conversions of rural buildings as well. So there is a differentiation here between the considerations of the previous application and this current one. Thank you.
Thank you. Roger Knoll. Remind you that you have 2 minutes, Mr. Knoll.
I'll try and keep it under 2 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I'm here under the same conditions. I know that technically this application is for a new dwelling, but as I understand it, that it is, although it's retrospective, it is more of a change of use because although I never saw it when it was completed, I do understand that the original house was completed as a holiday let, and that this is just now changing from a holiday let to a residential building. So I do understand what the planning officer said, but I would still contend that it's a change of use, and because it is actually no longer part of the business and more of an annex to the main dwelling house. HDC building control for the original use asked for better foundations, so that was duly constructed and the building completed. In the meantime, the family had expanded and it was decided to reapply as an annex and the construction completed. Yet again, I would contend that the applicants were ill-advised and that a decision should be deferred for a revised application to be submitted in this case. Finally, to address the reasons for refusal again, the local plan is now made and therefore more weight has to be given to new builds. It is part of the family estate within the small holding and would never be considered to be sold or disposed of as a separate dwelling and is therefore part of the home. The wider site has complaints of noise from residents who are not largely living in the district. One of the few addresses for a noise complaint actually came from Reigate. Seems a long way to hear barks from a dog. There is a boarding facility for retired Brighton and Hove greyhounds 2 fields to the west, which does make a lot of noise and is always a subject of complaints, and any sounds from there could be confused with this site, but definitely no close neighbours have objected. Points 3 and 4 of the reasons for refusal I have already spoken for in the previous item, but again I would comment that there has been poor consultation and a misunderstanding by the agent. Please consider deferring this application so that this building can be properly assessed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify a couple of points, it is not a change of use application. Now, permission has previously been granted for the conversion of a barn to holiday let. That is a material consideration, but it is not a change of use application because the building was demolished and what you have is a new build dwelling on the site. in outside of a built-up area boundary. It's not even adjacent to a built-up area boundary. It is in the middle of the countryside, and you have to bear that in mind in terms of our policies and how we consider the delivery of housing. It is not an annex. It is not proposed as an annex. Whilst I acknowledge, obviously, we've heard details of it being a family member, that is not what is being proposed before you. Thank you.
Councillor Croker.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, I find this one somewhat tricky to negotiate. I can fully understand how the applicant has got here, and I have a lot of sympathy. Equally, as the Head of Planning has just pointed out, it is a new dwelling in the countryside. And really, I'm not sure that deferring would actually help in this case, although it obviously would, much as the previous application, give a chance for water neutrality, for a water neutrality statement to be sorted out. I'll be interested to hear what other members think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Croker. Councillor Lambert.
Thank you, Chairman. No, house in the country, it doesn't comply with our requirements. It's not beautiful, it's not sympathetic, it doesn't complement its surroundings. It is what it is. And again, they're probably with the water neutrality the same 8 horses the same 8 years ago. And in which case it would be 4 horses for each application 8 years ago. So, and it's not water neutral. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from councillors? Councillor Potts.
I'll just make a very brief comment on the noise issue. I live further up the Wheatsheaf Road, also known as the Albourne Road, from this site, and any noise that I can hear is certainly coming from the Greyhound rehoming centre or rescue centre. That's not to say that there isn't any noise coming from this site, but yeah, just to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor van der Boer.
I would certainly support a deferral here. I think if you remove the house, you lose the business, and I just don't see the benefit in any of that. I think we need to have get our thinking caps on and see how we can make this work, frankly. It's important business. It's a minor house. It's a single-storey home. It's not in anybody's way. Nobody can see it. Nobody's going to complain about it. It's in the country. So, okay, but it's built. If it wasn't built, we wouldn't be approving it, obviously. But it's built. What are we going to pull it down and leave a slab there? And lose a business? That would be my thoughts. We might just want to defer it and have a bit more of a think.
Councillor van der Boer.
Can I just, obviously it's entirely up to members whether you wish to defer it or not, but just going back to Councillor van der Berg about what are we going to do, it's there. Ultimately, you have to consider an application as though it wasn't there. You don't give it more weight towards an approval because they've breached planning control and built it. You have to consider it exactly the same. Now, whether members wish to defer it, that decision rests with you. And obviously, part of the parking on this site was the same and that was deferred. I think officers' view is not all the reasons are likely to be addressed in a deferral, particularly around the principle of having a new dwelling in the countryside, but that is open to members as to whether you wish to pursue that as an alternative motion. Thank you.
Councillor van der Berg.
Let me just come back. We have retrospective planning. We've talked about this in the past, Emma, for a reason. And it's to give, here we have a retrospective application, and to decide to pull it down tonight just seems to me to be we haven't given it our full thought, that's all.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Trotman. Apologies.
Just a question, is this dwelling visible outside of the property boundaries?
No, it's not, but that in itself is not a justification. The key issue here is the principle of a new dwelling in the countryside, which goes against the principles of our local plan. obviously members need to be mindful if there is a case to have somebody on site 24/7, and there are policies in our local plan that consider that. But in general, there's a principle against new dwellings in the countryside unless it's demonstrated it's required on site for essentially for a rural business. That's the only real exceptions to that test. Officers' views it doesn't meet that, but obviously again that's something for members to consider. Thank you.
Can we go for a vote? Councillor van der Boer, do you want to put forward an alternative motion?
Yeah, I do, please, Chairman. I think we ought to understand the impact of taking the house down on the business, given that it is a rural business that potentially needs 24/7 accommodation nearby.
Okay, can we capture that motion, please? Right, I need
the motion is for deferral, subject to understanding the impact of the business by not being able to be tended to 24/7.
Councillor van der Beek, can I just check, is your motion also for the applicant to seek to address the other reasons for refusal as set out in the officer's report?
Sorry, yes, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, very quickly, Councillor Trott.
Just say that I would be happy to second that.
Okay, I'll come to that in a moment. Do we have, obviously, a proposer? A seconder? Somebody second the motion? Yep, okay. So we're now taking a vote on this motion, Councillor van der Boer, that we defer this to address all the points that we've discussed, come back on those later dates. All those in favour of that deferral, please show your hands. No. Against? Okay. Any abstentions? Obviously not. No. Okay. Therefore, the application is deferred. Thank you. Just whilst I'm here, moving on, you may have wondered what I was in discussion with the lawyer and officer was regarding Councillor Knoll. I allowed him to speak at my discretion because we hadn't had sufficient notice of him wishing to speak on this particular one. So that's what you may have wondered what I was talking about. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number urgent 8, urgent business. I don't have any urgent business other than I would like to thank, apologies, I should wait for the council now. Apologies, I was ahead of myself there, Councillor Knoll. I have no urgent business, but I would like to thank the officers and the members for their contribution to this and previous meetings of Planning South Committee, and to wish everyone a very happy festive season and a prosperous new year. And at 19:08, I bring the meeting to a close. Thank you.